Hello and welcome to ChatDPS. This week, Adam Cunningham has fallen into a vortex of AI, and I'm sure he'll give us a little bit of an update upon that when he gets back next week. But this week, we're looking at some of the geopolitical risks that have been created, particularly around the Iranian situation. And my very good friend Adam Green from Green Cyber has been writing about what things to look for locally so that you don't get caught out, and we maintain our free trade and what have you, the things that we're famous for here in Australia. Free trade. Anyway, Adam, do you want to kick off with the reason why you actually wrote this paper to begin with? Because I think some of the people will be interested in understanding exactly why you wrote the paper to begin with.
Yeah, so it's one of these things I enjoy diving into what we see happening in the geopolitical landscape, especially when it comes to cyber and kinetic war. For those who aren't aware, I'm a national ambassador for CI ISAC Australia. And what triggered this one in particular was CI ISAC's National Intelligence Office put out a flash update about the potential cyber threat surge coming through from Iran because of the kinetic war and the way it's happening, that they are losing a lot of their kinetic powers. And they'd actually been ramping up their cyber capabilities prior to a bunch of their battleships being taken down. So I looked at what came out of the NIO, and it was very interesting, but it was a snapshot that goes into a member portal. And then that made me think there's got to be some more information out there from other sources. So then I just went through to the main sources like your Palo Alto Unit 42 and CrowdStrike's threat feeds and stuff from Anomaly and a few others, to name a few, and then sort of pulled all of that together, collated it, and then went, this was a lot of work to pull this together. And everything that we'd seen in any of the information said the next 72 hours are critical. And I thought, well, if I'm spending this long putting this together, and others don't have time to do this because of their day jobs, maybe I'll just put it all together in a quick executive summary and then do the detailed stuff and get it through later in the day. Hence the executive summary that went across to you. But the main punch points of it is that because Iran's kinetic war capability had been crippled so quickly by US strikes, cyber warfare is their main artillery. And as a result, we would have expected to see quite a rise. As it was, we saw a bit of a rise in activity, but it wasn't quite as expected because so it's claimed, after I'd written that first white paper, it was claimed that Israel Defense had used a prayer app to try and convince people within Iran to defect against Iran, but it's unconfirmed reports that it came from there. And then there was also Iran's internet capacity had been reduced down to 4%, which would probably account for why we didn't see an instant increase in the surge.
That's an interesting point that you're making there, because obviously that what they were doing, my understanding anyway, is the fact that they were throttling the internet services internally to their own people to begin with. Whether this is true or not, I'm not too sure. But I mean, obviously, this is all rumor and innuendo. But so they were cutting them off from the outside world about what was being reported from the outside world, and so what the rest of the world were doing were cutting them off anyway, because that way there was no threat. Is that an understanding that's reasonable? Or
Yeah, and again, in war times, it's really hard to get the truth out of what's happening until we actually see it explicitly spoken about or written in a paper. But yeah, both of those sides of the coin actually make a lot of sense. And then we also saw, as a retaliation to what was going on, they were going after some AWS data centers to try and affect the capability on the other side.
yeah. Yeah. So, Robert, people, process, technology is the usual mantra. I'm guessing that, sort of like more of the same.
Well, I guess, yeah, I guess so. But I think the lens is GRC, and particularly the R risk. And I think if you're sitting here in Australia looking at this conflict, as you should be for any kind of major global event, I think leadership teams, executive teams should be going, okay, well, here's a global event. What does that mean in terms of any increased risk for our organization? And I think from an Australian point of view, given that we're part of this conflict, however you want to describe that. It makes particularly Australian critical infrastructure a target. Now, it may not happen straight away, as Adam has said, and you've said, Nick. There's some constraints, limitations on their capabilities for cyber attacks, but maybe in a few months, maybe in a few years, who knows? There'll be, I think, an increased risk for cyber attacks on critical infrastructure in particular, against Australian targets, UK targets, US targets. So the questions you would expect execs to be asking is, okay, well, do we now need to have another look at our assets and think about any hardening that we can be doing, any additional security, training awareness? So there's the people side of it. So making people aware. Adam's issued a white paper. So let's brief up our people to be additionally aware that there's heightened risk in terms of critical infrastructure attacks, and start taking steps to harden your systems.
So, Adam, just go back to you, mate. Sort of like 2 or 3 points that would be really helpful to a business manager who maybe isn't as familiar with, sort of like the GRC initials that we may be. So we walk into an organization, the CEO is going to be, what questions should he be asking of his team?
So absolutely asking around, and definitely the R in GRC is the bit that we're most focused on at the moment, the whole risk of it.
Yeah.
But looking at when we talk about hardening of systems, like what are we doing around multi-factor authentication? Because anywhere where there's conflict or there's heightened emotions around what we're doing online, credential theft and phishing attacks are always on the rise. So we need to look at what we're doing around protecting those identities and those credentials. So multi-factor authentication is one. Absolutely. What are we doing around email protection is another, because again, phishing is on the rise. And then to Robert's point, user awareness. We were talking, I'm going to go off script every now and then when we're talking about this stuff because I get so excited about it in a professional way. But anyone who knows me knows that I always talk about counterterrorism. I'm always excited about that stuff. But what we really need to watch out for is just the stuff that people click on, or when people are being sent files going, check out this video or check out this picture. There's a big surge in that kind of activity. You've got to be really careful when you on social platforms as well. There's a lot of clickbait out there. There's a lot of misdirected websites, because it's exciting stuff for people to look at when you see, this is footage from my balcony as the jets flew overhead and they were deploying their anti-missile technology to evade being blown out of the sky. And a lot of people are excited to look at stuff like that, or, interested, curious to look at stuff like that. We need to, as a CEO or as a security leader, it's awareness to people is step number one before you start looking at the tooling, which the first two to think about are MFA and email protection, and then obviously monitoring what's going on in the environment, so visibility.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's the raft of things that we need to, I suppose, think of as an umbrella over an organization for protection. Is there anything that we should be thinking of outside of the box? I mean, obviously we've spoken about the two or three things there. I'm thinking more around things like access to people are going to be done through MFA and through email. But I'm also thinking that there may be something in there from an API perspective as well, because API attacks could be more significant as well. Is that fair, or is that silly?
It's so again, going off script. When you look at who the allies are, the access to us, so the guys that we're fighting against, and the allies of Iran, they have extremely strong cyber capability as well. So they may not jump in on the kinetic war, but you can bet your bottom dollar there will be an upsurge in them involved in cyber campaigns against our allies. And, if we're out there publicly talking about supporting the efforts of the US, then that puts us, we're guilty by association. So I guess what we need to do there is consider all angles. And then the reason I didn't answer your question directly about API protection is some of these things that might come down the pipe might come down quicker than we can react with a product response. So I think to
That,
Robert's point, it's all about hardening and configuration of what you already have to start with.
Yeah.
right. That's the critical thing. So the CEO is going to be going, well, what the hell does that mean? Where am I going? What do I need to do in terms of hardening? Robert, from an arming people with tools, I mean, what's your advice to the CEO around that piece of it?
Well, I think it's probably worth pointing out as well. So we focus a lot on information security. It's probably worth also talking about physical security as well, which probably sometimes gets forgotten because there's so much focus on digital attacks, cyber attacks. But again, going back to critical infrastructure, when you're thinking about pipelines, OT, thousands of devices out there, you want to make sure that you've got something in place to actually monitor your physical perimeters and making sure that those are hardened as well. So it's both information and physical security. So you've got to look at your whole organization and look at it from those
Right.
aspects as well. So it's not just hardening the information, but also think about hardening your physical security as well. And I think it's a little bit of a meander, but I think one of the interesting stories that's come out, and I think you shared it, Nick, was the Financial Times report into what happened when there was that, US-Israeli attack on the supreme leader of Iran. And what they talked about was how much time was spent in basically hacking into CCTV. So I think the advice to the CEO is think about those assets that you don't normally pay that much attention to. So your peripheral OT assets, and making sure that there's no strange patterns of behavior around access to those devices as well, because it might be that what's played out in Iran is then taken and played back to some of those that carried out that attack.
Yeah, the fascinating thing for me reading that report from the FT was the amount of time they'd actually spent in that network and building profiles. I mean, like really sophisticated.
Yeah.
Where's this guy been? What does he normally do? How long does he spend in particular places? How long does it take him to get from here to the desktop? All that kind of stuff. Really, really intricate and very, very highly sophisticated. I mean, we talk about the CEO of Optus saying how it was a really sophisticated report. This really was sophisticated. The people knew what to the second, where he was on the street, how it was, where he was, how fast he was moving, all of those kind of things. And that was significant in terms of the result, I suppose, or the outcome of what actually happened that day. Adam,
Yeah, and so reverse it and go, okay, so how do you, as Australian CEO, how does your team monitor CCTV access and who's actually getting in there and
yeah.
making sure that there hasn't been people that have been in there for weeks, months, years doing things they shouldn't be doing. And that goes for, let's say, OT devices. So you're looking at your various monitoring systems, your SCADA systems, those sorts of things, making sure that people aren't actually in there already doing things they shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, really good point. Then this plays right into your stream, though, Adam, doesn't it? I mean, your early day background was before digital was actually part of the physical security side of things. Is there anything? I mean, is there anything that you'd contend with what's been said here so far, or are there other things that really should be looked at?
So I've probably been smirking a bit while you're talking, because anyone who's sat with me or seen some of my keynote speaking and is hearing this being spoken about would go, oh God, Adam used to bang on ad nauseum about CCTV. So back when I used to work with a foreign defense and intelligence capability joint venture with a power generator, and we had a cyber warfare capability as a service for educational purposes, of course, I would sit with they would be the best hackers on the planet, ethical, the best hackers on the planet. And I ask them, I go, how are you breaking in? And at the time I asked the question, I was expecting some sophisticated answer about, we do this phishing campaign and then we go whaling, and whaling is going after the C-suite. And then we get this, like we groom them, and then kind of like a LinkedIn recruiter campaign where we groom and then say, hey, can you sign this privacy statement? And the privacy statement's weaponized. That's what I expected to hear. The response was CCTV. And I went, yeah, but how effective is that? And they go, 95% of the time we get in on the CCTV, because CCTV, regardless of brand, regardless of what anyone says about, Hikvision versus a Bosch camera versus a Honeywell camera. It doesn't matter what the camera is. 95% of the time, these cameras are deployed with out-of-the-box credentials. Now, we've probably got a bit better at changing the credentials, but guess what we've not got better at doing? We haven't got better at going back and recycling or updating those credentials. And they're not usually a very sophisticated password that sits on a camera. There's also, I hope people are sitting there like those silly bobbing head dog things in their cars, because I bet you that facilities teams aren't there updating the firmware on these CCTV cameras. And I bet you security teams, IT security teams, aren't very involved in the CCTV that's on their sites.
No.
I bet there's a lot of organizations who don't realize how much CCTV interacts with their business. So that's the CCTV side. But then the interesting thing, I've gone, all right, so 95% of the time you do a sweep, the ping back tells you what brand it is. You go, okay, I know that these are the 3 credentials that are used out of the box. Bang, we're in. But what about when you're not? They go, oh, then we go for building management systems. And I go, okay. And when you can't get into building management, and I got the response, I don't understand your question. So I slowed down and I spoke clearer English. So you're like, no, idiot, understand your English, but the question doesn't make any sense. Like, why? And they go, because we never fail to get into BMS. So the reason they never fail to get into BMS is your building management system. And so you think like Schneider, Honeywell, Johnson Controls, like all the big industrials, that is the layer that sits on the, like all these big buildings we go into, and, shopping centers and airports and hospitals, they all sit on a building management layer. And on that building management layer, you've got everything like your fire systems, your lifts, your access control. The CCTV hangs off that. You've got boom gates for the car parks, if that's the case. All these SCADA systems and industrial systems and Internet of Things IoT systems hang off this off this building management security network. And then you think about it. Do you think Schindler's Lifts, very clever name, do you think Schindler's Lifts have a very good cybersecurity strategy? And does it marry up with the cybersecurity strategy for Honeywell Fire? And does that marry up with the cybersecurity strategy of Hikvision cameras?
Yeah, no. But
and do you think the facilities managers think the way we think? So
but this go back to my point, which is the CEO comes in and says, he's got to be starting to be concerned about interdepartmental communication. He's got to start asking himself, are my people communicating with each other in order to be able to achieve outcomes, or are they all focused on siloed KPIs?
I've got the answer to that is frightening. So when I used to have people come in for these tabletop exercises, and still to this day it happens. So you get the operational technology teams, so your SCADA teams, and you get your IT teams, and you bring them together. And I couldn't tell you how many times I would have the SCADA team and the IT team from an organization in the office, and they'd come in. So the IT team would go, "Oh, who are those guys? Or who are those people?" Go, "That's your SCADA team. Here? Don't you know them?" And they're like, "Oh no, I've never met them before." But they're the people running the security network in the physical environment. These are the guys running the security over here in the IT environment. And then you've got your executive layer over the top, and most of them don't know each other. The first time they've met is when they've come into this crisis management scenario. And you go, so there needs to be a greater convergence of, like, pull down the silos. So if I'm a CEO in an organization that has IT and OT convergence, I would be pulling all the teams together and making sure they all know each other. And then as a CEO, I'd be like, right, we're having a weekly stand up and I want to know what you're all doing together. Because to Robert's point, CCTV, you can, and I'm not, like, I could piss off a lot of people right now just by talking about the amount of examples I've got where I walk in and I'm like, so you lost 4 terabytes of data off your camera network. Does that not alarm you? Or, the artillery cage has had no camera footage on it for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And the only reason you know that is because of a situation. Does that not concern you? Have you not thought about potential foreign actors sitting there looking through these cameras and watching the movements on this site? Can't say any more of that or else I'll give away what it is. It's alarming how easily these things can happen. I had a solution engineer who used to follow me around, and he was like, I don't believe you that it's that easy to break into CCTV. So he's walked into one of the big buildings in the Sydney, and he's just got on the public Wi-Fi at the foyer, jumped from the public Wi-Fi onto the actual building network. From there, he could see the security systems on each of the layers, each of the levels of the building, and where all the equipment was housed, because it was named very nicely. And then he was able to actually pick out which camera was in the food court, and then get onto the camera in the food court and manipulate it. And he's come back and gone, okay, I believe you now. This is pretty bad.
Yeah.
So, I use examples like, there's way too many examples of the complacency around the physical security aspects of a property. And especially here in Australia, to bring it back to Australia, we think that we're on an island and we're too far away for war to come to us, is what we think, or we're too far away for an attack to come to us. But there's no borders in cybersecurity. There's no borders in cyber warfare. And all it takes is a sweep, and all the IP ranges that are showing are actually there to pick at. And that's where the CCTV and the building management stuff is getting picked up.
I guess sort of like trying to one eye on the time. So, I mean, if the critical message seems to be to CEOs at this moment in time, if you've not done a tabletop exercise, which, not many have, start thinking about one of those now. Start thinking about your strategy around that. It's not just your reputation that matters, although that is the ultimate end game. It's how you're going to get caught out, particularly if your people aren't talking together. Robert, have you got any observations before we close, my friend?
Not just what you said, Nick. It's down to preparation, and a little bit like what Adam touched on. Clearly, there's cultural issues within a lot of organizations where people don't understand what other key internal stakeholders are doing. So you've really got to look at your organization, identify who the key stakeholders are, both IT and physical security, bringing those together, make sure they're talking. So from a culture point of view, make sure your organization's all lined up. This is all in your preparation, in your planning, in your regular exercises. And then, as I say, when you overlay that heightened risk of attacks, particularly on critical infrastructure, that all just kind of, it'll just pulls it all together. And this is all about being proactive, taking those proactive steps to make sure that when these attacks do come, you're ready for them.
Yeah. Adam?
Your point about tabletop exercises, and you made the point there about reputation. I've become famous for walking around saying, anyone in security comes and tells you that your reputation's your number one thing, they're full of crap and don't work with them. Reputation can be improved based on how you handle an incident these days. So, because we've got breach fatigue, right? Everyone has a story about a breach. But what does improve reputations is a great response to a cyber incident, and then owning up to it and having a really good communication strategy around it. And that's what a tabletop exercise and a strategic communications exercise or crisis management exercise will actually bring out. And I stress on tabletop exercise because you don't want to find out how your team plays together when you're under live fire. You want to iron out all the kinks before it happens. So, I mean, in an ideal world, every 3 months we're running tabletop exercises, but cyber disruption cycles are a matter of weeks these days. So actually running these exercises, and it doesn't have to be a big thing. It's just practicing and practicing and practicing. Executives, technical people, just making sure that everyone knows where it's going to happen, because a cyber response these days is a business response, not a technical response, but you still need to know how all your players are playing together.
It is an overhead, and there is obviously a discipline to it as well, which needs to be taken into account. But I mean, the overhead is not as large as you think when you start putting a comparison against breach, which you're dealing with the remediation costs, and then you're dealing with 2 years worth of waiting for the not just the actors, but the regulators and everything to finish up what they're doing. So it's a real conundrum for those guys, and sort of making those investments up front and early is something to behold.
Anytime there's been a tabletop exercise, the feedback is resounding. That was the most fun thing we've done in our job. Can we do this again? So I think there's a lot of fear around doing it initially, and then once they do it, they go, we see the value of it.
It's not all just from technical perspective though either. I mean, it's about how you're actually, sort of like doing your business process. It's about how you're communicating. It's about how you're actually, the C bit, sort of like what are we compliant to? Because the wonderful thing about standards, of course, is that there are so many of them. On that note, thank you, gentlemen. It's been a real fascinating one. I hope that people get use out of this one, because it is genuinely a good conversation to be having within your organization at this moment in time. That was ChatDPS for this week. Thank you very much for joining us. Look forward to catching up with you again soon. Bye now.
Thanks, everyone.